pray. Teach us, O God, by your word and spirit. Help us to hear, know, and live the gospel, so that we might proclaim in word and deed the good news that you offer us this day, a message of peace to the whole community and love with faith through Christ our Lord. Amen. Our Old Testament lesson this morning comes from Deuteronomy, chapter 26, verses 1 through 11. When you have come into the land that the Lord your God is giving you as an inheritance to possess, and you possess it and settle in it, you shall take some of the first of all the fruit of the ground, which you harvest from the land that the Lord your God is giving you. And you shall put it in a basket and go to the place that the Lord your God will choose as a dwelling for his name. You shall go to the priest who is in office at that time and say to him, "Today I declare to you, the Lord your God, that I have come into the land that the Lord swore to our ancestors to give us." When the priest takes the basket from your hand and sets it down before the altar of the Lord your God, you shall make this response before the Lord your God. "A wandering Aramean was my ancestor. He went down into Egypt and lived there as an alien, few in number. And there he became a great nation, mighty and populous. When the Egyptians treated us harshly and afflicted us by imposing hard labor on us, we cried to the Lord, the God of our ancestors. The Lord heard our voice and saw our affliction, our toil, and our oppression. The Lord brought us out of Egypt with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm, with a terrifying display of power, and with signs and wonders. And he brought us into this place and gave us this land, a land flowing with milk and honey. So now I bring the first of the fruit of the ground that you, O Lord, have given me. You shall set it down before the Lord your God, and bow down before the Lord your God. Then you, together with the Levites and the aliens who reside among you, shall celebrate with all the bounty that the Lord your God has given to you and to your house.
Most of us, if we are generous, had someone to teach us, someone to inspire us. What is your story of generosity? Who taught you? Who inspired you? I meant to tell you I was going to ask you that so you could share your stories. I'm just going to give you a minute, and if there is someone who wants to share, I'd love to hear it. Who taught you to be generous? Allison.
My aunts, my Aunt Nancy especially, and my Aunt Tess, and they were night and day. My Aunt Nancy was very devout, and my Aunt Tess was the devil. But a cute devil, mischievous.
A generous devil.
Yes, a generous, mischievous devil, yes. So they were very special.
Allison sharing two different aunts of hers. One she said was very devout, the other was a devil. So see there, we can even learn from surprising sources that they taught her how to be generous. Thank you, Allison. Anybody else? Who taught you to be generous?
Mom.
Your mom. Thank you, Susie. How?
She always gives that.
She does. She does.
Broken down on us.
So Susie sharing that Mary, her mom, has taught her to be generous because she always gives to everybody. And that's true. We see that even today. Thank you both. Who taught you to be generous? Lee?
My grandmother loved it. They didn't have much money. She was a devout Quaker, and she spent every minute doing something for somebody
right, thank you for sharing that. So Lee says his grandmother Lovett was a devout Quaker, and she didn't have a lot of money or possessions, which neither did Jesus. So, but that she was always spending her time for someone else, and that's an important part of the message for us today. So thank you, Lee. Anybody else? Mary? God. Beautiful. She just preached the sermon.
I was raised as the daughter of a doctor and had lots of materialistic belongings. And George and I had a house fire, and Susie was less than a year old and lost bone china, crystal china, antiques, silver. But we had each other. And so we learned materialistic things on everything.
So Mary is sharing, she grew up the daughter of a doctor, and then when she and George were in their young married life together with small children, they had a house fire and lost everything, but they had each other and learned that material things were not the most important. Phil?
Not my first lesson of generosity, but a continued one is my mother-in-law.
Phil is saying a continuing lesson of generosity is from his mother-in-law, our dear Shirley. And there may be a couple people here that don't know Shirley. She is a giver. She writes cards, she bakes, she takes care of children. She supports our church. She supports people all around her. And thank you. That is a lesson for all of us. Sometimes people, doesn't sound like the people that you're describing, but sometimes people like to be generous so they can be recognized. And this is certainly not the case for all people, but let me just say the place I've noticed it is when people give large amounts of money. It's kind of a popular thing in our culture. They want their name on a plaque or a brick or a wall. And not that there's anything wrong with that, but I can see where that would be very satisfying. And honestly, I'm not that dissimilar in sometimes the ways that I give. Others of us have a particular need to be thanked for our gestures or our actions. But there are also people that give just for the sake of giving, not to be recognized. And I have a story of someone who taught me generosity. It's much more superficial than the profound things that you all have shared. But I have had a great uncle, my grandmother's brother, and we didn't see him all that often, but when we did, and when we were children, probably about my girl's age, we have vivid memories of his visits because he would, he had these big pockets, and he would say something, he would say, "Look, what is that over there?" And every time we would look, and then somehow something happened, and all of a sudden candy was falling from the sky. And we would say, "Where did that come from?" And he said, "I don't know, it must just be falling from the sky." So his nickname was the Candy Man. And I don't remember this, I'm told that it happened, it may or may not have. A lot of preachers in my family, so it's hard to say. That my sister and I were talking one day and said, it seems like it's always the candy falling from the sky when Uncle B is around. And the other one said, you're right. But don't tell him because the candy might stop. But the truth is that he loved the delight of that whole, the surprise of generosity. And he didn't need to take credit for it. That would have actually ruined the whole thing. He wanted it to feel as if it just fell from the sky, just a pure gift for us. The grace of God is God's pure gift. We didn't and could never earn it. It is candy raining down from the sky, but it's so much better than candy whose sweetness is short-lived. There are material things that we do earn for ourselves sometimes, yes. But the greatest gifts come from God. Remember the story of the Israelites in the desert when they were hungry and grumbling, and God made manna rain down. In this passage from Deuteronomy, God is reminding the people of the abundance of his gift. He reminds them that they're pilgrims, that they have come from another place in the land that they were finally glimpsing after this long journey. That their gift from God was not an entitlement. They didn't earn it, and if you remember the story, in fact, they were grumbling and complaining and angry the whole way. But it was not their own. It did not belong to them. It was a gift, not to hoard and not to squander, not to grasp or keep from others, but to inhabit, receive as a gift, and to be stewards, to share, and to give back. It's like God is saying, everything you have, including this best gift, the one you've been waiting for all these years, is a gift from me. Remember all I have done for you out of love. God makes it clear that our gratitude is a response. It's a response with action. So there's gratitude, and then action flows from that. Gratitude begets generosity. Generosity also doesn't mean giving your leftovers. It is your first fruits. This is a central Old Testament theme all throughout. In fact, the Old Testament, when it comes to monetary possessions or following the law, the Old Testament says, do these things in terms of the law to receive God's blessing, or do these things to keep yourself away from sin. Do these things. The Old Testament, in terms of our belongings, is a tenth. It is the first fruits, a tenth of what we have. In the New Testament with Jesus, it's give me everything. Give me your whole heart. I'm fulfilling the law by saying, give everything and follow me. The best part of the harvest, back to this first fruits, it is not leftovers. 10% off the top. First thing, not last. I think the ancient Israelites were like me. If you forget to give it first, all of a sudden it's gone. And I've mentioned before that we have a wonderful Methodist tradition around generosity of all kinds. Our Methodist founder, John Wesley, he did this. He started out just as a student and as a preacher, and he earned only a little bit. But eventually, he earned a lot. He was at Oxford University and became very prominent. And I never knew exactly how much they were talking about when the story would be told that he continued to live on his first meager salary, and he gave the rest away. As he made more and more, he gave the rest away. But I found an article this week that said he eventually earned up to 1,400 pounds, and he lived on 28. Well, now, you can see that that is a big gap and a big difference, but what that meant was, in our equivalent, is that he made about $300,000, and he lived on about 29. He gave away 98% while he lived on 2, because it was enough. Because it was enough, and he gave out of his gratitude for God. We also have a wonderful history of that in our own church. Linwood Long, who I'm told wore the same blue shirt every day, except when he came to church, and I assume he may have worn the same suit. The same type of blue shirt that current members of our church wear every day, left a gift when he died to this church out of his gratitude for this church. And I am told that when the treasurer of our church got the call from the attorney and went to receive it, thought, well, that's wonderful and we'll be grateful for that, but can't imagine that it's that much because he lives so simply. And in fact, that was a wonderful, generous gift that allowed us today not only to be out of debt as a church, which is no small thing. Many churches, large and small, are just constantly scrambling to pay off their debt, but we have a wonderful facility in our fellowship hall because of generosity. All of these gifts are ours. But it does not come from us, it comes from God. They say you can really see a person's priorities by looking at their calendar and their bank statement. First fruits don't just come monetarily. If you don't have money, that is fine. The most generous people actually all over the world, though, are ironically poor. But it's not just money. It is our hearts. It is our welcome that we extend to others. It's our prayer. It's the way we go first to God. First fruits come from our time and our energy. If you paid attention in the scripture, it's a little easy, as I was hearing it, I remember it's a little easy to check out with this. It sounds just kind of ceremonial, and but everything in scripture has a meaning. So it doesn't just say, take your first fruits and offer them. It says, bring them and announce to the priest, and then present them this way, and say these prayers, and there's a ceremonial, a ritual way about it. It's more than just charity. It's something that is an act of worship. It involves your words, your prayers, your body. In this reading of Deuteronomy, this is God's instruction to them just before they go into the promised land. Here's how you show your gratitude. Yes, you bring the first fruits, but you bring them as an act of worship. It's a real offering, something that you do with your whole self. It's an investment that you make with all of who you are. If you think about how we use our time, I've had, as part of the ordination process, you have to go through different time use surveys and things like that. But in order to kind of see if the way you use your time is aligned with your priorities. It's estimated that the average American watches somewhere from 4 to 8 hours of television a day. That is between 28 and 56 hours a week. That is more time than most people spend working. It's equal to more of the amount of time we spend sleeping. And it's a heck of a lot of time, more time than most people spend in church or giving for others. Do we give God our first fruits of everything? Do we look first to God about how to direct our path? And I confess to you that I haven't been doing that as an expression of my gratitude for all the ways God has led me throughout my life. And so I'm working right now in my devotional life to attend more to prayer, to go back to Scripture daily, to remember all that God has done and remember God's promises. The word faith in the original Greek of the New Testament it's translated faith, but it really means trust, like with your whole self and your whole life. It's as if you are literally falling back into the arms of another. I'm working on increasing my faith in that way, my trust in God. And gratitude constantly brings me back. Gratitude begets generosity, and generosity begets blessing, not primarily in physical goods or in physical health. Jesus had neither. Think about it. Jesus came and neither had possessions, nor did he have a kind of everlasting physical strength. He was vulnerable and weak and wounded and even died. But it is in our understanding of God's never-ending love. That's the blessing that we get. We get a life that is really life. We get comfort in those times of struggle because God is with us. Think about the Israelites in Egypt in the desert. They had a lot of struggle, but God was always with them, and when they trusted, they could see the signs. We get the strength to travel forward. Think of the 40 years that they were journeying. And we get the assurance of God's presence, providence. Remember how God all throughout Scripture says, remember how I saved you from slavery in Egypt. Remember how I gave you manna in the desert. Remember with Jesus how I gave myself for you. Think of the miracle of salvation. Not just for the Jews. These were the chosen people. But as we see in our reading, chosenness comes with great responsibility. But they were saved not by following the law, but by believing in Jesus because of God's generous gift. And think about that gift extended not just to those who were on the inside, but those who were on the outside. The gift of salvation for all people, Jews and Gentiles alike. What we get in our blessing is a life of freedom and abundance, not the fear, will there be enough? Is there enough? Think of how many times Scripture tells us, be not afraid. I found there are many Bible passages related to generosity in the Bible, but one is from Proverbs, just sweet and simple. A generous person will prosper. Whoever refreshes others will be refreshed. We can live free from fear when we are generous. And it is a sign that we are trusting in God's grace. From the very beginning, God has been generous. I love that Mary said she learned generosity from God. That's what the life of faith really is all about. We look to God's example, the nature of God, and that's what we form our life around. God gave us all we needed in the garden. But fear, greed, the fear of not having enough, of something that instead of looking at what we've been given, look at what was not given, and the curse resulted. God gave manna in the desert, but remember what the people did? God said, collect what you need for the day, and tomorrow I'll give you enough. So, but they hoarded. They were afraid that there wouldn't be enough. They weren't grateful. Greed overcame gratitude, and curse followed. But when a poor widow in the time of Elijah was close to losing everything because she was so in debt, the prophet Elijah told her, gather empty vessels to multiply the one jar of oil that you have. And he made it into oil overflowing, using all the jars that they could find. When Jesus told the stewards at the wedding party of the story we just went through last week, they filled them with water and he returned them full of wine. When they were not afraid to trust God, there was an abundance. That's the nature of the blessing. When a little boy gave the disciples 2 fish and 5 loaves of bread, gratitude and generosity resulted in the feeding of all. God is always generous with us. And in the gift that he gave to these wanderers, these pilgrims, he said, remember that this is my gift to you. Not to hoard, not to squander. Don't be afraid, but be grateful and be generous. And you will live a life of blessing, a life of freedom, a life free from fear. Give the first fruits. Give everything of your heart, your time, your energy, your talents.